Hey, I have a second channel. Cube Comp MTDX.
Hey everybody. So in the second half of the year 2022, Microsoft released Windows 11 version 22H2, which does bring quite a few improvements to the previous build of Windows 11, 21H2. Kind of similar in the way that Windows 10 1509 brought some improvements to the original Windows 10 1507. So I have a list here of some of the new features that Windows 11 22H2 brings. For example, new Start menu folders or group apps, new option to change the number of pins in the Start menu, taskbar ability to drag and drop files and apps, taskbar overflow menu to hide apps that don't fit, new snap layouts drag and drop interface, new task manager with a modern interface, new live captions feature to improve understanding of spoken content, new voice access feature to control a device with voice, new touch gestures for tablets, new Smart App Control feature to block dangerous apps, legacy interface with visual changes, updated focus feature with focus session integration, updated File Explorer with tabs and redesigned navigation pane, updated quick settings with options to control Bluetooth devices, updated print queue and print dialog apps with automatic printer detection, improved power management tweaks to reduce energy consumption, option to uninstall updates from settings app. So that's just a handful of things. And what I'll do is I'll provide a link in the video description to an article from, what is it, pureinfotech.com, which goes over a lot of these new things. So I must say, Windows 11 22H2 brings a lot of good things, and there's also some bad things. So let's go over to the computer room and let's have a look at the Windows 11 test rig that I've recently installed Windows 11 22H2 on, and let's go over some of the good and some of the bad. Okay, here is the Windows 11 test rig. It is actually built out of four mid-tower Lux Blackmax hardware. It has an AMD A6 6420K APU, 8 gigs of memory, Radeon HD graphics integrated into the APU. It's got a 240 gigabyte Samsung SATA SSD. It's got a 500 gigabyte data storage hard drive. If you look at the back of it. So, the interesting thing about this machine, we'll talk about later in the video. But anyways, now let's go ahead and start this thing up and get a little tour of Windows 11 22H2. One thing you may notice right away is the boot animation has changed. Now it looks more like the progress circle you see on, let's say, maybe Android or, for example, YouTube when a video is loading or buffering. So yeah, a little bit different. So there's a handful of things that have changed in Windows 11 22H2 that may make it more worthy of upgrading to. So, for example, if we go into the Start menu, which you can see is on the left side, we go to Start Settings. You do have options for folders and the ability to have more pins. For example, you can see now recommended is hardly anything at all, and you have more room to place pinned items, which may be nice for your needs. Or if you don't want to have that many pinned items, you can choose more recommendations. So you can see recommended, there's a lot more options there now. So we'll set it back to default for now. So you can personalize folders among other things. There's a lot of stuff you can do here. Like for example, if I turn on this folder, personal folder. So right here you can see there's a personal folder right next to the power button, which brings up your folder that has your documents, downloads, pictures, music, videos, all that good stuff. So you can turn on, for example, all these options, and this actually makes the start menu behave much more like Windows 7. That was one thing I never much liked about Windows 10 is, well, I mean, now to some extent Windows 10 start menu did have shortcuts to like your documents, music, pictures, stuff like that, but it didn't seem like it was nearly as customizable as it is here in Windows 11 22H2. So big improvement there. And also, if we close out of this, if I right click on the taskbar, you may recall in Windows 11 21H2 all you had was taskbar settings, but a lot of times I find myself right clicking to get to the task manager, and you can see they now have a shortcut placed here for task manager. Big improvement. If we go to taskbar settings, we have a lot of options here to, for example, align stuff. So taskbar behaviors, here we are. So you have the option to automatically hide the taskbar. That's pretty given. But here, taskbar alignment. I don't think this was an option in Windows 11 21H2. If you installed a $5 add-on, Start All Back, it would give you a Windows 7 style start menu and also align your icons to the far left. But you can see here, you can have it, of course, center, which is the default Windows 11 interface. If we align to the left, you can see everything's to the far left, which is how I personally like it. I think everything should be to the far left. That's just my preference. But there's lots of options here where you can go in and customize things. For sure. Now, for example, we go to System. Now, personally, I've actually liked the Windows 11 settings menu better than the Windows 10 settings menu. But in 22H2, they give you more options. For example, if we go to Focus, here's a focus session, which I had read off on that list earlier. So I ain't going to cover every single little thing on that list, but I am going to try to cover some things. So you get a lot of options in here. If we go down to Bluetooth and devices, here you can access Bluetooth devices, printers and scanners, cameras, your mouse, autoplay settings, among other things. So printers and scanners. It has not actually installed any of my printers on my network, but anyway, you can go in here to add a printer and stuff like that. Go down to network and internet. Here are your options for network and internet. Under personalization, you can change colors and things like that. In apps, you have your installed apps, which are programs that are currently installed on the computer. You may be able to see how in Windows 11 22H2 they are bringing more stuff out of control panel to settings. So we'll just say that settings has been a project that's been 10 years in the making. I mean, when you think about it, Windows 8, that's when we first started seeing PC settings, which was kind of like a duplicate menu of the control panel, except it had far fewer options. But when you compare what we have now in Windows 11 22H2 to Windows 8 back in the day, we definitely have a lot more options. It's definitely a far improvement over what we used to have. So you can go to Advanced App Settings. Not going to go too deep into this. And here you have shortcuts to things like uninstall updates and things like that. Default apps, which I'm still a bit critical of how the default apps interface is in Windows 11. In Windows 10, for example, if you go to Settings and you go to Apps and you hit Default Apps, I just like how you can simply choose your defaults for your email client, map viewer, your music player, your photo viewer, your video player, and your web browser. Now, shortly after the release of Windows 11 21H2, Microsoft applied a fix to allow you to easily change your web browser. So for example, if we look for Chrome, you click on Chrome, you have the option at the top to make Chrome your default browser. So we now set Google Chrome as the default web browser. But, for example, if we look up like for example, Media Player Classic. This is a third-party media player I have installed. I mean, you have the option to set defaults by file type, but there's no option up top to just make it your default video player. Why can't they bring this back? I mean, that's something they really need to improve on. Anyways, we have access to offline maps, optional features. And here's your list of features and stuff you can add in. Now, in this system, we have it set up as a local account, which normally is nearly impossible to do. We'll talk about that later in the video. Time and language. And to my understanding, when you install this operating system, see, the thing is, I actually did an in-place upgrade on this machine, so I didn't clean install it. But when you do a clean install, it still defaults to Pacific time. Like, it should ask you what time zone you're in and the out-of-box setup, to be honest, in my opinion. Moving on, we have a gaming option. We have a gaming menu here. We have our accessibility options in here. Privacy and security. We can set permissions for apps, kind of like on a smartphone. And Windows Update. So, for example, in Windows Update, you have the option to uninstall previous updates. Go to Update History. You can see updates that have been previously installed. And down here is the option for uninstall updates. It's probably somewhere else in here too. I think I've seen it earlier when I was looking through everything. So in here, in Advanced Options, you have the option to receive updates for other Microsoft products, get me up to date, download updates over meter connections, among other things, your active hours, all that good stuff. So another thing I like to mention is we're running Windows 11 Pro, and you do have the option to set group policies for Windows Update to notify to download updates. So these are options that I had set when I installed the previous build of Windows 11, and you can do it exactly the same way as you do on Windows 10. And if I haven't done so yet, I'll put a card up in the right corner on how to do that. So Windows 11, you can still configure the Pro version to notify you to download updates instead of automatically downloading and installing updates, because nobody likes their computer getting randomly restarted and losing stuff over maybe a simple driver update or something that got installed at 2 o'clock in the morning. Now, I mean, you do want to make sure you do keep your system up to date, but there's nothing more annoying than losing unsaved work because your computer randomly restarted due to a Windows update getting installed. So here we have additional options in here. If we just go back, go to Update History. Let's see here. So you can't right click and select a given update, but if you go here to uninstall updates, you can uninstall some updates. So another thing, we'd seen earlier how now you can right click on the taskbar and get Task Manager. Windows 11 22H2 offers a new Task Manager, and I think it's pretty nice. So this is how it opens. Instead of opening in, for example, opening in Windows 10, if I open a Task Manager, normally by default it opens like this, which is nearly useless. You can see here we have accesses to our processes that are running right now. We have access to performance, and you can see performance of your CPU, your memory, among other things. And I do like the way these graphics look, and I think it changes based on whether you're running dark mode or light mode. Let's see. So if we go to settings and we change from dark mode to light mode. Yeah, so the task manager does look a little different. Let's go and restart it just to make sure it's loading right. Okay, so that is the task manager when viewing in light mode. The dark mode I think looks really cool. I think it looks really cool. But anyway, so we have performance, we have app history, so you can go back and recall resource usage history from your applications. Here you can look at your startup apps and enable or disable apps from starting with Windows. You can see the current active users. And here are the detailed view of processes that are running. And you also have access to services in here. So you have the ability to stop and start services or restart services right from Task Manager. So now you don't have to actually go into Control Panel or however, you can go to Administrative Tools and go to Services. That way you can just go right into Task Manager and bam, you have services. So if we open a few things, Windows 11 has a pretty nice little visual on snapping items, so you can just make a choice of which one you want. If you want to do a split down the center, you can do a split down the center, and you can select a different program or application to fill the other half. Or let's say if you want to have this one taking up more space and Task Manager on the far right taking up a little bit less space, you have that option as well. So overall, it's really nice how you can customize this however you wish. Very cool. Another thing I'd like to mention is Windows 11 22H2, they actually fixed a really big issue that I was very critical of. So for example, if I access some pictures, in Windows 11 22H2 we now have preview thumbnails of folders. Guys, this was a huge issue, and matter of fact, this was the deal breaker for me when I was deciding whether to run Windows 11 on my main system, Mid-Tower Deluxe. So now we have previews of folders. It makes it much easier to tell whether a folder has items in it, and it also gives you a general idea of what's in that folder. So you can see for videos as well as for images, pictures, you now have the option to preview what's in a folder without having to click on it one by one. See, that was a big issue in Windows 11 21H2, is there was no thumbnail previews of folders. You had to manually, you had to go into each folder one by one to see what was there. At least now we have a general idea of what's there. So a huge fix there for sure. Big fix. So while Windows 11 22H2 has a lot of new features to offer, and my honest opinion is a huge improvement over the original Windows 11 21H2 release, there are some issues. So I did talk about one issue earlier that has not been fixed and really needs to be fixed is, of course, default apps. They really need to bring back the interface that you have in Windows 10, where you can simply set defaults for common used utilities or programs like your media player, your photo viewer, your video player, your web browser, which they do have the web browser taken care of, but the other items they need to take care of for sure. Now, if we go to Windows Update, I'd like for you to look at something right here. It says, Windows Update is committed to helping reduce carbon emissions. So it apparently seems that Microsoft is concerned about the environment, making the environment a better and cleaner place. But how is that the case when Microsoft sets the minimum system requirements for its operating system, Windows 11, to such a high threshold that the majority of computers older than 3 or 4 years old cannot run it, according to them? They don't meet the minimum requirements. I mean, we're talking about systems built in 2017 and even 2018 that can't even run this operating system due to not meeting the minimum requirements. So, Windows 10 is supported until 2025 as of now. Come 2025, there's going to be either a lot of computers that are still running Windows 10 out there, or many are going to probably end up purchasing new computers with Windows 11, and the old computers will either get recycled or thrown in the trash, or just used for something else. But I'm sure that a lot of computers will end up thrown in the trash, and electronics getting trashed, is that really good for the environment? I think that's even more serious of an issue than Windows Update causing more carbon emissions. So, Microsoft, you need to get it together with your minimum system requirements. I mean, what's the purpose? I mean, time and time again, many out there here on YouTube and the internet have shown that Windows 11 will run quite well on systems that are nowhere near closely meeting your elite class minimum system requirements. And I call them elite class minimum system requirements. It's only like the most elite computers out there on the market right now. The new computers, those are the only ones that can run your new shiny operating system. Whereas computers that are 10 years old, up to 10 years old, that could run Windows 11 just fine with maybe a couple of minor upgrades, like an SSD, cannot be upgraded to this. Now, the truth is, you can actually upgrade to Windows 11 even if your system does not meet the Microsoft Elite Class minimum system requirements. And there are several ways you can do it. One of the probably one of the most common ways is using a utility called Rufus, which will allow you to change the installer for Windows 11 to not check to see if your system has Secure Boot turned on, and if it has TPM 2.0, and if the CPU installed meets the is one of the ones on the CPU support list. Because let's be honest, there's a lot of computers out there that are well capable of running this operating system, and even Microsoft themselves, they have instructions on their website on how to tweak your registry, at least on Windows 10, to be able to upgrade to Windows 11. So even when Microsoft is posting workarounds to get around their own minimum requirements or elite class requirements for Windows 11, it's like, why do we have the Windows 11 system requirements so artificially high to begin with? So that's one big issue, in my opinion. We have an operating system here that is getting much better with, of course, 22H2. But yet, only the elite class new computers out there can run it, or computers that were manufactured not too long ago. I mean, sure, the new computers will run it great. I mean, I don't doubt that a bit. But there's a lot of hardware out there that can actually run this OS really well. The system that you see right now that we're testing this on does not meet the elite class minimum system requirements for Windows 11. For example, I have the PC Health Check installed on here right now. And this is actually intended for Windows 10. And you can see how this computer that's running Windows 11 22H2 does not meet the Windows 11 system requirements, or in other words, the Microsoft Elite Class minimum system requirements to run Windows 11. Because TPM 2.0 has not been detected, and the processor isn't on the support list. It meets everything else. It supports secure boot. There's plenty of memory installed. It's got enough storage. And the processor, although it is a single core, it's a 2-thread. So, I mean, this system, as you've seen, it runs Windows 11 really well. So I'll go ahead and close out everything. Let's just go and do a restart. This hardware is approximately from 2013. The solid state drive was purchased, I think, 2017 or 2018. The processor, which is the AMD A6-6420K APU processor, normally it's a 4 GHz processor. I have it running at 4.6 GHz, so a little overclocked there. But even at stock clock, it would still run really well. Now, of course, this APU is actually pretty low end. It's not very powerful by any means. Any Ryzen system would absolutely blow it away. For example, the Ryzen 5 2400G. But guess what? The Ryzen 5 2400G also does not meet the Microsoft Elite Class minimum system requirements to run Windows 11. But yet, that hardware would run it just fine. We're talking about, so this system here, again, it's 9 years old. The only big upgrade it's had done to it was a solid state drive. Now, this hardware is in a totally different case now than it was before 2020, because back in 2020 the Mid-Tower Deluxe Black Macs got upgraded to the Ryzen 5 2400G. Another example, the Mid-Tower Deluxe, my system, has a Ryzen 7 1700X. It has 32 gigabytes of RAM. It has a Radeon RX 550 graphics card. It's got a 1 terabyte Samsung SSD, M.2 NVMe PCIe SSD. It has 4 terabytes of data storage, plus another 2 terabytes on a separate hard drive, and another 4 terabyte backup drive. Plenty of storage there. But yet, that system also does not meet the requirements for Windows 11. So, there's a lot of computers out there that, unless you use something like Rufus, which most average people are not going to know how to do. Let's be clear here. Probably the majority of people that are running Windows 11 on unsupported systems are tech enthusiasts, people who know how to work on computers. Now, there is information out there that says that if you run Windows 11 on systems that don't meet the minimum requirements, you won't receive updates. But if you go to Windows Update, you can see we're receiving updates. Probably the only updates we will not receive are feature upgrades, which I covered in a recent video on how to install. So, if you're running Windows 11 on unsupported hardware, most likely you will have to manually install your feature upgrade yourself. Which, in my opinion, is probably not such a bad thing. Because these feature upgrades, a lot of times, they're the equivalent of doing an upgrade in place install of your operating system. And many times that can mess with settings and how things are configured. So that's one big issue. Probably the biggest issue of all is the fact that the Windows 11 system requirements are artificially high. They are way too high. This makes this operating system like Windows Vista for a different reason. Windows Vista back in the day was, when it came out, it was pretty bloated. And I mean, well, more than pretty bloated. It's actually really bloated. It was a huge step up from Windows XP for minimum requirements. Yet, Microsoft set the minimum requirements so low that if you install Windows Vista on a system that just met those requirements, your experience would not be very good. Here we have Windows 11, which, from my findings and experimentation, will actually install, well, in some cases install, but it will actually run on anything down to an AMD socket AM2. We're talking 2006 hardware on the AMD side of things. Or Intel Cedar Mill, which is approximately 2005, 2006. Not saying it will run really well now on socket AM2. If you're running, let's say, an Athlon 64X2 dual-core CPU with 4 gigs of RAM, and you install an SSD on that system, it may actually run pretty dang well. Socket AM3 would actually run pretty well, depending on what you have. Same goes for the Intel side of things. So, again, I know I've been going on for a few minutes now about these requirements. This is single-handedly the biggest problem with Windows 11, is its artificially elite class minimum requirements. And I call them, again, elite class for a reason, because they're so ridiculously high. And it's going to ultimately end up causing one or two things. Number one, it's going to cause an e-waste disaster, because there's going to be a lot of computers that are deemed incapable of running Windows, or at least Windows that's supported with security updates. Or those computers will remain in service with Windows 10 after 2025 and will no longer receive security updates. So Microsoft will have a decision to make by 2025. They will need to either relax the minimum requirements for Windows 11, bring them back to reality, or number two, they will need to extend the support for Windows 10. And in case you're wondering, yes, Windows 10 is currently still getting feature upgrades, but really they're not offering much in the way of new features. They're really just service packs that bring more security updates to the table. That's really all they are. I mean, nowadays, if you have, I think, as long as you have 20H2 installed in Windows 10, the current Windows 10 22H2 feature upgrade is like installing a service pack. It's not actually like upgrade reinstalling your operating system. Okay, so that's out of the way. Issue number two. Windows 11 22H2 has strengthened the requirements for a Microsoft account, let alone internet access. So when you're installing Windows 11 and you go to run setup or out-of-box experience, it will not finish up unless you connect it to Wi-Fi or Ethernet to an internet connection and sign up for a Microsoft account. So there were workarounds in 21H2, and you had to run this on Windows 11 Home. But in Windows 11 Pro on 21H2, you had the option to bypass the need for an internet connection. You could just say, I don't have internet, and kind of like you do in Windows 10, to set up your local account that way. But in Windows 11 22H2, even Windows 11 Pro, you're required to either connect to a domain, or if you're not, if you select the option that you're not with a school or an organization or whatever, you have to create a Microsoft account. For those who work on PCs, it's just ridiculous. It's just ridiculous when, let's say you're, for example, you're setting up new, let's say you're building new computers to sell, or you're working on a customer's computer and you're reinstalling your operating system. That creates a problem when it requires you to set up a Microsoft account, because you're not the owner of the PC. Therefore, you shouldn't have to set up a Microsoft account when you're going to be selling the computer to somebody else. So, now, I don't know for sure. I mean, I could try this maybe in a later video if this workaround still works. But here's how you can get around that in the newer Windows 11. So, Rufus, the same utility I mentioned earlier, now offers the functionality to bypass the Microsoft account requirement and internet access requirement
and set up a local account, and it even offers the option to set up a local account with a specified name. This is automatically baked into the installer, and also bypass all the privacy questions. Pretty much when you install this, I think you either go straight to the desktop or you get a very minimal OBE setup. So yeah, the thing is, and I've tested this before in a previous video, Microsoft, they went a little too far with this Microsoft account requirement. Because let's say, for example, you're installing Windows 11 on a PC, and for some unforeseen reason, either there's a driver issue or hardware issue to where there are no network adapters present. You are at a dead end. You can't click next. You can't click I don't have internet because that option's disabled. You therefore have a dead end. How did I get past testing? That's what gets me. So, two big negatives about Windows 11 22H2 is the continued presence of these artificially, ridiculously high minimal system requirements. And now in Windows 11 22H2, they have strengthened the requirement for Microsoft accounts and the requirement to have internet access just to set up your PC, even if you're not even internal connected to the internet. I mean, there are I would say there are some situations where you're using a computer offline. Therefore, you should not have to connect it to the internet just to get logged in for the first time. There are reasons that the local account should still be there. I mean, obviously, Windows 11 still has that functionality right here. As you can see, local account. Let's say I'm a technician and I'm setting up a PC for a customer, or I am building PCs to sell. Local account should still be there as an option. You should not have to use third-party utilities or hacks to be able to install the operating system. So, anyways, Windows 11 22H2 brings a lot of new stuff to the table. A lot of good things, I think. But, then again, those two big negatives need to be addressed. Anyways, that's my thoughts on Windows 11 22H2. Hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Well, everybody, that wraps it up for this video, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to Cube channel, and be sure to tick the bell. That way you get notified of new video posts. Also, I recommend following Cube Computer Company on Facebook. A link is in the video description. In addition to computer tech videos, I have a second channel, CubeCompMTDX. Links are available at the end of this video. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching and your support.